Besides the channel and the good looks, what am I famous for?
The Vienna.
What am I famous for?
The Rook! Gotham Chess knows how satisfying it is to sacrifice the Rook. The Rook is the second most powerful piece on the board, worth 5 points of material. Sacrificing your Rook is a big investment, one only justified by a fierce attack. We've compiled the top 5 times a professional player sacrificed their Rook in a game. Our first game is from over 100 years ago. The game was played in 1922 in Teplitz-Schönau, Germany, between Geza Maroczy and Savielly Tartakower, names that will sound familiar to well-studied chess players. Maroczy was 17 years Tartakower's senior, so this was a game between distinct chess generations. Maroczy was known for his conservative, defensive style of play, and the Maroczy bind bears his name. Tartakower was a talented player known for his personality off the board, famous at the time for his witty chess aphorisms, such as, "The winner of the game is the player who makes the next to last mistake." This game was a perfect reflection of the players. The young, brash, larger-than-life Tartakower against the older, solid Maroczy. Tartakower put on an attacking masterclass with the black pieces that featured the sacrifice of both his rooks. In this seemingly quiet position, Tartakower played perhaps the most famous rook sacrifice ever, with rook takes h2, allowing the queen to begin a long-term attack with queen takes f2 after the king recaptured. In the short term, this was a rook sacrifice for 3 pawns, but in the long term it would open up the white king for a devastating attack. To give up this much material for an advantage that isn't immediately obvious is what makes this one of the greatest rook sacrifices of all time. Fast forward a few moves and we arrive here. Maroczy has given back some material, and Tartakower is compelled to sacrifice again. He plays rook takes f1 check, which is sacrificing a rook for a bishop, so technically an exchange sack. White only has 2 legal moves to recapture with the king or the queen. If the queen recaptures, black has mate with queen h2, and Tartakower's idea after king takes is the clever e5, opening up the bishop diagonal to pin the queen to the king. This is spotted by Maroczy, of course, and he steps out of the pin, but after the final black piece joins the attacking party, it is unstoppable. After this check, Maroczy resigned. Here, once again, white has 2 legal choices, giving up the queen for the knight, or sidestepping with king g1. If white had gone king g1, can you see the knockout blow for black, leading to a mating pattern? Pause the video to solve. If you saw knight h1 check, congratulations. This allows the knight to remove the pesky white queen on the next turn, paving the way for a checkmate that white can't stop. The next game was played about a decade later in Madrid, Spain in 1933 between Spanish countrymen Martin Ortueta Esteban and José Sanz Aguado. In more recent memory, Fabiano Caruana won a game in an incredible similar fashion, referring to it as his own Ortueta versus Sanz. Much like the previous example, both rooks were sacrificed on the way to a victory with the black pieces. Sanz's first sacrifice was a positional one, opting to develop the knight instead of protecting the rook on f6. It's so good that there are those who believe it may have been made up, but we'll give the players the benefit of the doubt. It's worth noting that Ortueta sacrificed the exchange right back a couple moves later. The second rook sacrifice was much flashier, showing deep calculation and endgame mastery. In this position, Sanz found rook takes b2, sacrificing the entire rook with the knowledge that in the long run, the black pawns would decide the game. The moves that followed demonstrated incredible patience on the part of Sanz, finding 4 consecutive only moves to force the promotion of a pawn. After the knight recaptured on b2, Sanz played c3, threatening to win the knight and promote on b1. Ortueta thought he could sacrifice on b6, leading to a drawish endgame, since after a takes b6, white's knight could easily get to the critical d3 square, allowing it to get to c1 to stop promotion. But Sanz played the beautiful intermezzo c4. The idea is that the knight can't take on c4, since after c2, white can't stop promotion, and if the rook tries to save itself, black can promote as well. Black's best attempt is rook b4, and if white plays c2 too hastily, black can capture on c4 and protect the promotion square. But Sanz sees all of this and attacks the rook with a5. Ortueta tries knight takes c4, leaving his rook hanging, But can you spot Sands' final move that led to his opponent's resignation? Pause the video to solve. That's right. Finally, Black can play c2, leading to resignation since White can't stop Black from promoting to a queen. Our first online game in this series was a rapid game between Jan Krzysztof Duda and Anish Giri, which was awarded Chess.com's 2022 Game of the Year. Duda and Giri were both chess prodigies from their respective countries of Poland and the Netherlands, and both have been on the top player circuit for a few years, no doubt familiar with each other's styles of play. For those not on chess Twitter, it's worth noting that Giri is known for his social media banter and occasional trash talk. Duda, on the other hand, while still having a Twitter account, mostly lets his chess speak for itself. After sacrificing a piece in the opening, and Giri later sacrificing one back, Duda found the incredible Rook g7 check, which in itself was awarded the Move of the Year. Giving up the entire rook is the only way to force a mating sequence. After king takes g7, f6 check, king h6, knight g4 check, king g5, can you spot White's only move that leads to forced mate? Pause the video to solve. That's right, queen f5 check, sacrificing the queen for a forced mating sequence. After knight takes f4, rook takes f4, the king can't capture on g4 on account of h3 mate, so the king goes to g6. This simply delays the inevitable, as White has forced mate after the discovered check rook e5. Giri must have seen this line as well, and he resigned right then and there. Our next game is the oldest of all of our examples, played in 1851 in London, England, between Adolf Anderssen and Lionel Kieseritzky. Some of you may know it by name, the Immortal Game. This was from the Romantic era of chess, long before computers or even modern openings and techniques. It was much more of an art than a science back then, with the emphasis not always on winning or losing, but creating the most beautiful games in the process. This game is a prime example. The first rook sacrifice, after a bishop sacrifice, happened in this position where Anderssen played bishop d6, leaving both rooks en prise. Kieseritzky opted to take the g-rook first, then Anderssen didn't bother to save the second rook either. Singularly focused on the black king, he played e5, hanging his other rook with check. Anderssen brings his king to e2, then Kieseritzky, thinking he's out of the woods, develops his knight with knight a6. After Anderssen played knight g7 check, the black king is forced to d8. Can you spot the final brilliancy in this position? Pause to solve. If you spotted queen f6 check, well done! After the knight recaptures, it no longer protects e7, and White played bishop e7 checkmate. For those keeping track at home, in the final position, Black is up 21 points of material. This flourish of sacrifices, including both rooks, is why the Immortal Game will always have a place in the history books. Our final game is known colloquially as Kasparov's Immortal. Played in Wyk aan Zee, the Netherlands in 1999, Garry Kasparov faced off against Veselin Topalov. At the time, Kasparov was the highest-rated player in the world, above 2,800. Topalov would have his best years ahead of him, becoming FIDE World Champion in 2005 and eventually reaching 2,800 himself. To say this is a great game is an understatement. Many agree that this is the greatest game of all time. In this game, Kasparov managed 4 rook sacrifices. How, you ask? Well, not every sacrifice was accepted. In this position, Kasparov spotted a line involving a back-to-back rook sacrifice. Rook takes d4. After Topalov accepts the free rook on d4, Kasparov played rook e7 check. Black can't take this rook because this leads to a mate in 4 with queen d4 check. Naturally, White avoids this mating pattern and plays king b6. After a couple more checks and a sacrificed knight, we arrive at this position. Here, Black is up 7 points of material, and the engine gives a slight advantage for White. Kasparov plays yet another rook sacrifice with rook takes b7, in which the opponent can't recapture due to the threat of queen b3 checkmate. The white pieces then start to chase around the black king for a few more moves, and the game arrives at this position. Can you spot the final brilliancy played by Kasparov? Pause the video to solve. That's right, rook d7. Kasparov solves the problem of his hanging queen by pinning the black rook via sacrifice of his own rook. In this case, black must accept the sacrifice as everything else leads to mate. Kasparov then picks up the black queen and a rook, so when the dust settles, it's a queen versus rook endgame, and Topalov eventually resigns. We hope you enjoyed all of these beautiful ways to sacrifice the rook, and that you might be presented with your own opportunities to do just that on Chess.com. Post your favorite rook sacrifices in the comments.